Good morning, everyone. Um, so thank you so much for choosing this session to either visit us in person or for our friends virtual today. Um, so our session is towards constructing military-connected student inclusion, a student panel and discussion. Our students will come, they're just not gonna sit up here for the first part as they don't have a speaking part, so they'll join us a little bit later. So good morning, my name is Joe Rasmussen. I get to serve as the Director of University Veteran Services here at UW-Madison. I've been working with military-connected students for the last 12 years on campus. Prior to coming to UW, I was a graduate student, but my military-connected student journey started much earlier. So I was born and raised in Janesville, Wisconsin. I enlisted in the Marine Corps straight out of high school. In fact, I signed up about 4 or 5 weeks before September 11th. I had to get my parental signature and enlist at 17. My parents signed off on that. My dad's a Navy veteran. Both of my grandfathers were veterans also of the Marines and Army. I served on active duty for 4 years, so from 2002 until 2006, I fixed airplanes. Sometime along the way, I decided when I got out of the military that I wanted to help my fellow service people. When I came back to Wisconsin, I went to UW-Whitewater, and I earned a bachelor's degree in social work. I came here to UW-Madison and earned a master's degree in social work. I did a couple different internships at the VA hospital and realized that I still wanted to serve veterans and military-connected families, but higher education was the right place for me. I feel lucky. I love supporting military-connected students. I think it's amazing what we can do at the University of Wisconsin, and every day I feel this pull and this sense to do more and create better.
Thanks, Joe. My name is Amanda Vensky, and I'm lucky to work in University Veteran Services as the Education Benefits Program Manager. I'm entering my 4th academic year in the office, and really a lot of what I do is making the GI Bill and other programs work for many students on this campus. I am a 2-time Badger. I'm very lucky to have done both my bachelor's and my master's degree here in the School of Education. And I'm originally from Wisconsin, so I didn't go too far from home to be here at UW. When I set foot on campus as a freshman, my dad was actually still active duty in the Wisconsin Army National Guard. And it wasn't really until I was here as a student that I didn't realize that there weren't that many people who had a parent who served in the military who live in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is not a majority military state by any means. And so by being connected with University Veteran Services over the years, I was really fortunate to be supported with GI Bill related things, but also learn a little bit more over the years. And now I get to learn from students all the time, which is one of my favorite things that happens every week. I'm also a first-generation college student, and it has been really important and impactful, I think, for my family to see sort of that generational effect of service and how that has connected as a military-connected student of what it means for things that I've learned. But it's also wonderful for me to be able to connect with students in the ways that I found really valuable too. So things we're going to talk about today. In this first portion, Joe and I are really excited to talk about introductions to military-connected identity, give you some context, some knowledge, and explore that together. And then speak about some notable strengths and key perspectives as well of this population. I believe this is the first time at the Diversity Forum that we have had an entire breakout session about military-connected identities. So I'm really excited to be able to kind of grapple with some of the nuances and different maybe categorizations of things as well. Then we'll move into our student panel discussion. I'm really thankful for our 3 wonderful student panelists that we have here today that you will get to meet. And then we'll move into a closing.
Okay, so to set this part up and really this hopefully this whole first part sets everybody up with a baseline knowledge, both about who's here as students and what the military and veteran population is across the nation. And I think that part's especially important, as Amanda mentioned. We don't have a lot of active military service members here. On campus, you might see some folks wearing uniform. They're probably in ROTC. Around the state, we might have seen some people wearing a uniform or not wearing a uniform supporting elections. Maybe they help facilitate your COVID-19 tests. But our interactions here are few and far between with the military. It's striking. I grew up here and I didn't really see a lot of military myself. But when I was on active duty, I lived in the Virginia Beach, Norfolk area, and everybody, I mean, you can't cross the street without walking past either a veteran or somebody with a haircut that suggests they're probably in the military. It's very hard to hide in that area. So hopefully this sets us up for the student panel. So background about University Veteran Services. As you can see, University Veteran Services started in 2014. At the time, we were called the Veteran Services and Military Assistance Center, or VSMAC, which wasn't an acronym I was terribly proud of. But I was excited for the work. This was the first time that UW-Madison had brought together the financial benefits piece, which we'll talk about later, but is very complicated, and probably the reason why most of our students who have a military connection can actually be here, and the student services aspect. So we had at the time an assistant dean for veterans, which was part of the precursor to student affairs back when it was a division of student life. For 10 years, we've been able to support military-connected students at UW-Madison through this first joint partnership, and now everything is self-contained within student affairs. This was really a response to the global conflicts, the war on terror, and the evolving needs of supporting military-connected students. If we go back for a minute and we think about 1944, there was the Service Members Readjustment Act, which was the GI Bill. Here at UW-Madison and at schools across the country, the population on campus doubled. Not the population of military-connected students, populations doubled. We had folks who were never able to go to college before come back from the war and earn degrees. The university here responded by building on Library Mall extra libraries. So there were these metal Quonset huts on Library Mall, and those were extended libraries. We had, over by Camp Randall Stadium, more student housing. The university really scrambled. It was an amazing response. Over the next several generations, the United States participated in more conflicts. So the Vietnam War, of course, was one that was really important to this campus. There was a response from students who were protesting the United States involvement. There was a bombing at Sterling Hall, which led to the death of a graduate student. Moving forward in the very early 90s, there were more student protests against the military. In particular, the faculty senate voted to have the ROTCs removed from campus because of the United States policy in the military at the time discriminating against gay individuals who were serving. But 9/11 was the big one. 9/11 was the big one, probably the biggest as far as military-connected students from who showed up. So more students showed up. The services they needed were more complicated, and the GI bills that evolved out of 9/11 also became much, much more complicated. Which brings us to the student support, the advocacy, the policy work, the direct personal services, and the connection with campus partners bullet point that we have at the bottom. University of Veteran Services is right now 4 full-time staff members. It's the largest it's ever been. So in addition to myself and Amanda, we have Mike Pinero, who's hard at work today helping students, a retired Army officer who is passionate about supporting military-connected students and treats every single person who works in our office with care and dignity. And Cece Becker, who is also today helping military-connected students, helping plan programs like the ones we did earlier this week for Veterans Day, and has a brother who's currently serving on active duty in the Air Force. Our office is a small office that couldn't work without the support of our campus colleagues. So we're often meeting with academic advising, we're consulting with conduct and assistance. We are hopefully integrated throughout campus. And if we're not, and you're a campus partner, we'd like to get to work with you more.
So what does that military-connected identity look like at UW? What is that community today? It is certainly a smaller percentage of campus than in the past, perhaps. Right now, we have about 2,000 military-connected students at UW-Madison. That is across all education levels, undergraduate through professional levels. And this includes anyone who has served in the U.S. military, so veterans and current service members, especially in the National Guard and Reserves, as well as their family members. So a parent or guardian or a spouse that has served or is serving in the U.S. military. So when we say military connected, we really include all of those populations. That is maybe different from other communities, but it's something that here in higher education is really an important umbrella to draw that far. That is different from formal definitions. So when we say student veteran, that can be someone who has served for any length of time. That can be someone who just returned from basic training. That could be someone who, is fulfilling their service obligation one weekend a month, a 2-hour drive away in the center of Wisconsin. Or it could be someone who, served for decades on active duty and is now here. So the community really varies widely, and with it being at least a couple thousand students, it is nice to see the wide breadth of experience as well. Those populations also overlap. So there's quite a few folks who are in that children of veteran or service member category, what we would maybe call military kids sometimes, who also maybe are feeling the call to serve and be connected to the military in another way in order to fulfill that obligation that maybe they grew up with that sense of service. What Joe alluded to of students, having GI Bill and what does that mean for how we're connected to them. Most of these students are likely eligible for some type of military or veteran education benefit, such as the GI Bill. We do administer about 10 different programs in our office across federal and state education benefits. It can get really complicated. A lot of folks are eligible for multiple benefits, and it's really that situation where we try and provide those individualized services to meet their needs, and also make sure that they're getting the support that they deserve and that they've earned.
Okay, so who's here? This slide talks a little bit about that, so I'm gonna read through what we have on this screen, and then I'm gonna talk to you about why this matters or what it actually means. So first off, this data is largely from a UW-Madison study called VetWays. VetWays is a product of the School of Education. Dr. Ross Benbow is the PI, the principal investigator. And he started looking at military-connected students on college campuses in Wisconsin and examining their social networks. That study later on expanded to 5 additional schools across the United States. If you were to go to his website, you can find a lot of data, including some of these pieces we pulled out. So first up, 32% of our students are discharged from active duty, and I'm going to talk about what that means in a minute. 63% of them are still serving in the Wisconsin National Guard or the Reserves. On average, The people who do have military service serve for 4.5 years, and that's very typical. Most of them have 3.8 years between high school and starting college. I'm going to talk about what that means too. And then most start university within 6 months of when they leave the military. So first off, what this means is that most of our students are in the Wisconsin National Guard or in the reserves. They have a military service obligation while they're students. So that shows up on campus in the classroom. They have a required drill that they have to attend that starts on Fridays. It shows up when there's a natural disaster like flooding on the Mississippi River. And it showed up during the COVID-19 pandemic when our Wisconsin National Guard members were running COVID testing sites. They were volunteering or voluntolding to work at polling places. Some worked in nursing homes to help supplement the staffing shortages that nursing homes had. They get used for a variety of things, and they often have to make a choice at some point. What's more important, or what can I set aside? Is it education, or is it school? Can I do both at the same time, or can I at least try to get through school and fulfill my service obligations? For the people who served in the military, so 32% have been discharged from active duty. They're done. They did their military service. There's a wide range of folks and their feelings on that. I'm very proud of my military service. I really liked it. I had an extremely positive experience. If you would have asked me in 2007, I would have denied my military service. And that's not because I wasn't proud of it, it's because I wanted to fit in. I was going to a college that was primarily 18 to 22-year-olds, and I didn't want to be seen as an other. I looked very young, and it worked. The 4.5 years of military service is super common, so one enlistment, one period of service. That's what most people do in the military. So on a U.S. air carrier, at least back when I was in the military, the average age of a person serving on an aircraft carrier was like 19 years. So 19-year-olds are essentially running the ships. Now, there's actually older people running the ships, but there's a lot of 19-year-olds at least cleaning the ships, as one of our panelists might be able to share with their Navy experience. But 3.8 years means they start school before they get out of the military. So they're very eager. They're trying to hit the ground running. Oftentimes students feel like they need to catch up. I felt that, right? I was moving into the dorms at Whitewater, Wells West, 10th floor, and at the same time that my friends were buying houses. So it's a really complex thing when you come out of the military and you feel like you're behind. Children of veterans. So this is actually the largest population who receives educational benefits on campus, thanks to some really, really generous changes, both at the national and state level. A lot of military kids get to receive education benefits because of their parents' military service and likely disability status because of the injury that while they served. Increasingly non-resident, so we have a lot of military kids who will look a lot like any other college student, but they come from a different place, and we'll touch on that later. The growth has been huge, though. So military kids have passed veterans as the benefit users a couple years ago and have now flown past. We're looking at 60% overall of benefit users are military kids, and close to 70% of undergraduate benefit users are military kids. All right, so nationwide, who do we have? This is the US population who serves in the military, and I'm actually going to turn for a minute because it's hard to read on here. But these quintiles show that The people who join the military, who serve on active duty, come from the middle. So it's not the lowest of low income, and it's not the highest of high income. They're a cross section of the middle of the United States. If you're looking at this, and you see that the middle two on the bottom, so the lowest, which is up to $41,691, accounts for 19% of the recruits that join the military, but the next three are above 20%. And the next two, 21 and 22%, those folks would actually qualify for Bucky's tuition promise. So they're in the middle, especially for Wisconsin, but they're in the lower middle as a larger percentage. So 43% would qualify for Bucky's tuition promise. But that doesn't mean that there aren't families who have more wealth that join the military as well. So the top two, both the 21%, which is that 66 to 87,000, and then that highest, which is 87 and over, account for a good chunk of people who serve in the military. There are also people who serve in the military much more ethnically and racially diverse than the state of Wisconsin. If you look first on your right side of this, you can see that in 2004, so I was in the military at that time, racial and ethnic minorities made up 36% of the actively serving U.S. military population. However, by 2017, so still this is older data, that number had jumped to 43. That's more than double the state of Wisconsin as far as racial and ethnic minorities are concerned. And then this lower graph, which, my apologies, it's hard to look at this and turn, shares some of the same information, but pushes it out even further. So it shows that even within diversity, ethnic and racial diversity in the military, it's going to become more diverse as a population, making up a fairly substantial chunk by 2048.
Military-connected populations have also changed when we consider who is serving overall. Over the last several decades, there has been quite a change in what women have been able to do within the military, and also the percentage of women that are in the military. So there's rising representation, which has increased in all of the branches over time. But also, it's really important to note that there's no significant differences that exist in the proportion of commissioned officers in the enlisted force. So what does this mean? The percentage of women who are in the military are also represented at that same percentage within the leadership roles in the military. So it is something that has been shown that it's not just women are a number within the military necessarily to represent that rising population. They're also represented in the leadership spaces and the decision-making spaces. And that does vary across branches. Not all of the numbers are exactly the same. The Marine Corps, for example, is slightly under their total population, or that percentage for women who are represented within the officer force. But other branches are maybe a little bit higher. So it just kind of depends. But you can follow over time that there has been a pretty rapid rise in recent times. And this has also changed of what types of roles women are allowed to hold within combat roles and things like that. And what has changed within the last couple decades of maybe a role that previously wasn't a combat role is now out of necessity related in some way. The military-connected population nationally has also changed dramatically in who we see as our leaders across the country. So the share of the population who has served or is serving is declining. So in 1980, about 18% of US adults were veterans, but that share fell to 6% in 2022. So the people that you know overall who are veterans has shrunk. And active duty service members now comprise less than 1% of all US adults. And so it's a much smaller population than perhaps what has been in the past. It also is because it's sometimes what people call a family business. If your parent is in that industry, you also might be interested in being part of that industry. This line graph that is here, that is in the two separate colors represent the House and the Senate. I know that it's difficult to distinguish between the two. But the trend overall is what's most important. This shows that it used to be in the 70s that the vast majority of our elected representatives in the country were veterans. And over time, that has fallen off sharply. And that is not true anymore. It is now quite the minority within elected representatives. So thinking about what that representation looks like nationally has changed quite a bit. It's also important to note that veterans who served in the last 30 years make up the largest number of living veterans. So when perhaps you think about who might be a veteran in your life, that might not actually be the statistically likely person who would appear as a veteran.
Yeah, I like to think about this congressional number as a representation of decision makers. So if we think about who was in control in making decisions 40 years ago, a large percentage of those folks had military service. And so today, if we look at who the decision makers are, and that could be here at UW-Madison, it could be in local, county, or state leadership, or it could be in private industry, we're just way less likely to have somebody who has that direct military connection in as a person who's a decision maker. However, the largest population is people who served in the last 30 years, so perhaps that trend will change a little bit as the post 9/11 veterans mature and move into those leadership positions themselves. So this one's really important, and this is actually, now that we've talked a little bit about statistics, hopefully something that will resonate. Notable strengths and key perspectives are important. Oftentimes when we hear about veterans presentations, we think of deficits. I have 2 degrees in social work. I have sat through a lot of trainings and education where we learn about PTSD. We learn about veterans homelessness, suicide rates. All of these are way too high, and all of them are terrible. And I am glad that that gets attention because it needs to. But it also doesn't set us up to work with veterans and their family members and help highlight those strengths. So actually, when we talk a little bit later, I'm going to use a concept that Dr. Benbow found in his VetWays research of things that were missing and turn that around, and we're going to talk about how those things are actually strengths for our students.
So what's a strength we can think about within how military-connected folks end up in education? Military service supports and empowers military-connected families overall, and it really provides that agency with educational opportunities. So we can speak a little bit about GI Bill and education programs overall and changes that have happened over time. But one thing that is very true is that over time, education benefits have been cited as important for veterans and service members and their families. So it's that transformative access to financial support, and it's also perhaps some views towards social mobility is what folks would maybe even identify as what education benefits mean. So post 9/11 era veterans cite education benefits as one of the most important reasons that they joined the military. About 75% of newly enlisted members of the military in 2011 noted that they joined to receive education benefits. And this was when the post 9/11 GI Bill did exist in some form, but it was before the most beneficial changes had already come into effect. So I wouldn't be surprised if this number is maybe even higher now. The changes that have happened within education benefits in 2013, the federal post 9/11 GI Bill, which can help support tuition expenses, housing expenses, book expenses, really major expenses across education, was expanded to become the Forever GI Bill, which meant that a veteran who earned this GI Bill would be able to have it for the rest of their life. In previous to that, it had an expiry date where folks were maybe not able to use that benefit with all of the competing obligations that they might have had. But this also meant that it was kind of a transformative change for veterans to be able to transfer this benefit to their children as well. And I'm a product of this, and I was very thankful to receive my father's GI Bill and split it between my siblings because he was very fair about how we divided it between all of us. But he knew that he was never going to get a bachelor's degree. That school was not for him, and that's part of why he spent a career as an enlisted man in the Army. And he was very thankful that this was something that was available for his family. So it helped me, it helped my siblings, it helps students now, but it also gives back to their family and the person who earned it and helps continue to support them over the years. There have also been changes within our state benefits that are available here in Wisconsin that also mean that there's this multi-generational effect of what's available for people to support all of those sorts of educational opportunities. Even if folks do not look at further educational attainment, it has been shown that military service does actually have an impact on how they show up within household income as well. So looking at both of these, you can see that the darker color, it's coming across a bit as gray right now, that's on the top, is for households that have a veteran as the head of the household. And the other color is for households that have a non-veteran listed as the head of the household. And you can see that across all sorts of educational levels, households that have a veteran listed as the head of the household actually have a higher income.
Okay, so what can we do here? Outcomes. Outcomes of the post 9/11 GI Bill. Outcomes are what we do at the university. We graduate students, right? They show up, they go to our classes, they join student organizations, they participate in student government or other things, and then they move on, hopefully, into a successful career. Because of how the GI Bill is set up, however, for-profit institutions have found that the post 9/11 GI Bill is extremely beneficial for them. So the largest recipient of post 9/11 GI Bill benefits is a for-profit institution. In fact, 7 of the top 10 are for-profit institutions. 2 more are private schools, and 1 is the entire University of Maryland system. They have a really, really strong online and virtual program. However, a study from the American Institutes for Research that was actually just released this year showed that veterans and the post 9/11 GI Bill has very positive outcomes for students at flagship institutions, especially in the Great Lakes region, which, I mean, can't get much more specific than that. Veterans using the post 9/11 GI Bill complete their degree at much higher rates than financially independent students at large. Controlling for other variables, veterans who settled in one of the 6 Great Lakes regions completed a bachelor's degree at a flagship and earned 10% more than their peers, right? So we actually have a role in positive outcomes here at the university and here in Madison. However, we're falling behind a little. So Madison actually isn't a leader in this number. In fact, our admissions numbers are quite low, or perhaps I should say enrollment numbers to be more accurate. So last year we enrolled 9 students as freshmen who had military service. The trend got worse. This year we enrolled 7. Transfer numbers are a little bit higher, and we've got a transfer veteran who's going to talk to us here in a little bit. But I think we have some work to do at the university. We have record applications, and we have record student classes, and I'm not quite sure how we have record in the wrong direction enrollment numbers for our student veterans. So this is the slide that I talked about. So this is aspects of military culture that was missing from the university experience. This came directly from UW-Madison students. They said they showed up to campus and they thought that camaraderie and structure was missing. It probably is a little, or at least it's different than what they experience in the military. Accountability, respect, common purpose, self-discipline. These are actually the core values, the takeaways that you build, that you grow while you're in the military. Students felt like these things were missing, probably because they look different than what they experience in the military. But we'd like to argue that bringing these things to campus are actually ways that students can find a lot of success at the university. Camaraderie and teamwork shows up everywhere, as does common purpose. Non-traditional learning experiences, I mean, the Wisconsin idea and the Wisconsin experience speaks to that.
So to think about that Wisconsin idea and the Wisconsin experience, the Wisconsin idea it signifies that principle that education should influence people's lives beyond the boundaries of campus. It's what we see of campus showing up in the rest of the state. And it's also kind of just that fabric of Midwest values. But then the Wisconsin experience is the way to be able to apply the Wisconsin idea, how it shows up on campus, and what that means for the UW community. So it describes how students develop and integrate core values of empathy and humility, relentless curiosity, intellectual confidence, and purposeful action across their educational experience. And a lot of the things that Joe just highlighted as components, as traits, as personal experiences and values that folks might bring really show up within those themes.
So common purpose and community as a Badger. I like to first share that the new service member is different than the previous service member. So the legacy veteran service organizations, the VFW, the American Legion, have their purpose. They have congressional charters. They got folks in DC. They have folks here in Madison who lobby and advocate for programs, for things that support veterans. Those are important. But the newer generation are coming out and they're creating things like Team Red, White, and Blue, which is a nationwide program that has local chapters. And those local chapters have veterans and veteran supporters who volunteer, who clean up conservancies, who go for walks. Some have run clubs. They're not based in a place that they go to, they're based in the community. Another one, Team Rubicon, started by a UW-Madison alum who joined the Marine Corps after he graduated, which partners with agencies like the Red Cross and comes in after natural disasters to help clean up. So how does common purpose and community show up as a Badger with these community-based values, right? And how can you apply that to an engagement in research? And I think about, again, things that this campus did during the pandemic to help support research that improved COVID-19 testing. Campus traditions, there's traditions everywhere, from jump around between the third and fourth quarter to convocation and commencement, right? A lot of these things, the band, marching bands came from the military. Civic and community participation, we love to talk about Peace Corps volunteers, the things that happen. Military service is all volunteer. Folks signed up to be part of something else that was bigger, and they're still looking for that. So we're gonna transition into our student panel. So if you just give us a minute, we're gonna bring some students up. We have several questions that we'll ask them, and then if we have enough time at the end, we'll have an opportunity for people to ask them questions as well. So come on up.
Give them a warm Wisconsin welcome, please. So our three panelists that we're so lucky to have here today, AJ Brown, Natalia Torres, and Melanie Laughlin.
Okay, so first up, AJ. AJ is a junior at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, pursuing a major in international studies with a focus on global security. He's a proud U.S. Navy veteran, probably swept a lot on the ship, former explosive ordnance disposal technician, and leader of the 2024 new student veteran cohort. As a BIPOC student, AJ is passionate about familiarizing others with the student veteran experience in hopes of addressing any dividing preconceptions about the military. He believes in the importance of advocating for veterans on campus. Their unique life experiences enrich UW-Madison's culture and diversity. Beyond his academic pursuits, AJ enjoys educating fellow veterans on VA disability system and getting tossed around doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Natalia Torres is a fourth-year student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, majoring in international studies, information science, and history with a certificate in political science. Deep breath. In terms of involvement on campus, Natalia is a House Fellow, also known as RA, for University Housing, and a former undergraduate research scholar. She was also on the planning committee for Latina Heritage Month and vice president for Anthro Circle, UW-Madison's anthropology club. During her third year, Natalia studied abroad for an academic year at the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. After graduation, Natalia hopes to continue her education and further explore the fields she believes deserve more visibility.
Okay, and Melanie Laughlin is a third-year student at UW-Madison, majoring in elementary education and special education. Melanie grew up mostly on the West Coast, moving often for her father's military career. She currently lives in the suburbs of Milwaukee and considers Wisconsin her home. Being a military brat is not her only exposure to the military. Melanie is currently serving in the Wisconsin Air National Guard. She signed within the past year and just returned from a semester off training. She is not only involved in the Air National Guard, but also a student leader in Crew, a Christian organization on campus. She leads the military-connected Bible study, where two of her identities can coexist within a space that allows that space for other students on campus. Outside of school and other commitments, her interests include volunteering, reading, flying, and traveling.
So to start off, we'd love to hear more about what does having a military-connected identity mean to you? And of course, feel free to also share more about yourself of maybe what was not represented in your bio, but you would like folks to know.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Close? Okay, sorry. Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Natalia, and both my parents are veterans. My dad actually retired here in Wisconsin from the Army, and in the sense of what does having a military connection means to me, it means being part of a community that's really unique in terms of experiences, especially being a military kid. I grew up moving around. I actually was born in Virginia by the Virginia Beach area, and I grew up in Germany, lived in Texas, and then Wisconsin. And so I was able to really learn so much about my world around me due to the military experience, especially learning different cultures, which I think really became the foundation of my identity and wanting to learn more about others. I think the military experience also has allowed me to gain skills such as being adaptable to new situations and challenges in different environments, and has allowed me to really view the world in a different way because I was given the privilege to see and understand from others around me.
Hi, I'm Melanie. So I think again, I'm a military brat or military kid. my dad serves on the same base as me. He serves on a building right next to me. So I currently am in Milwaukee. So it's able just to like have that parental and kid experience in serving together. I think the military experience for me was very foundational in the fact that a lot of kids, like their superheroes, are like Batman and Spider-Man and all that, and my superheroes were my dad and his friends. Like being able to hang out in a hangar where like planes are parked, and just being able to see like this larger than life people in action, and knowing that that was something that I wanted to do as well. Just like Natalia was saying, I was able to be able to get those foundational skills of being adaptable and understanding like if something doesn't happen the way that you're expecting, okay, let's adapt real quick and let's move on and continue, and we can make this even better than we thought before. So just having those skills has definitely helped me in life and moving forward.
Hi, everyone. My name is AJ. I really appreciate this question because it's made me reflect on kind of how weird my military connected identity is. Similar to these two, I grew up with parents in the military. My dad was in the Air Force, ended up retiring, but I grew up in Madison. Actually, I just went to high school here on the west side. And so I grew up around the military and was like, okay, this is really cool, but I was the only person that had a military parent. So all my friends were always like, oh, what does your dad do? Does he have a gun? Right? Like it was always, nobody really knew what to do with me and my family. But I ended up going to school outside of Wisconsin for a year. So I was a military connected student, not a veteran myself at all. So I got to do that. I also was like in ROTC, got to do that. It was a lot of fun to wear a uniform, but not actually being in the military. And then I ended up enlisting. I dropped out of college and was like, I want to go. My dad was like, if you're going to join the military, you got to become an officer. Go to college first. And I was like, I'm going to go enlist. So I did that. And it was one of the things that I look back of like, yeah, I probably should have listened to my parents. And also it was a great opportunity because I got a lot of those same experiences because I didn't travel when I was a kid. And I ended up getting to move all around the U.S. and all around the world. I was stationed in Guam for 3 years. And then traveled around to Asia. So from a kid from the Midwest, everyone was like, where's Wisconsin? They didn't know anybody from Wisconsin. And then I ended up in Guam with 4 or 5 dudes from Wisconsin, people. So yeah, it was kind of cool to see the diversity of the military that they talked about and getting to travel. One last thing I'll throw in there, my dad was activated, so I believe he was in the Air Guard, and then 9/11 happened, got activated, deployed to the Middle East for that, and then I, in 2021, was part of the drawdown of people leaving Afghanistan for the end of that full 20-year conflict. So it was interesting. I called my dad. I was like, "Whoa, this is weird that we both were technically a part of the same operation." So yeah, that was my military connected identity.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, AJ, people didn't believe me that summer is hot in Wisconsin. It thought it was snow year round. So where's home? For some military connected students, answering the question, where are you from, can be difficult and lengthy. If you were to claim a place as home, where would you choose?
Yeah, so often this question is I always get it, like, where are you from? In my head, I'm like, okay, should I give them the lore or should I just just say Wisconsin? But actually, I've been living in Wisconsin now for 10 years. I go to university here. I built, my education, my interests, and I just became the individual I am today because of the fact that my father was told he had to move to Wisconsin. And so I've always said Wisconsin is home to me, but I also recognize how other places have shaped me. And it's kind of interesting. I think the other two will also talk about this. It's also interesting you're talking to individuals. You go, yeah, back when I lived in Germany. And people go, wait, what? Germany? And so it's just you're always going to go through this cycle. It's a very cyclical of just explaining yourself and your experience. But it's really a reflection of, wow, I really was able to live in all these places and experience. But yes, at the end of the day, Wisconsin is my home.
So I actually had this conversation with my dad when I had just landed on the plane back from basic training and tech school. It was the first time I had seen them in person for a couple of months. And immediately one of the questions was, Dad, everyone asks me where home is and now I don't know, what's your answer? And immediately he was like, I've always been confused on this as well. Your heart and soul's confused because you don't know what to do. However, he's like, at the end of the day, my home is in every individual that I interacted with in the military. So my home's in Germany, my home's in Japan, my home's in Washington State, my home's everywhere. So at the end of the day, I find home in anywhere where my people are, but also at the end of the day, I do find Wisconsin home now as well. So that's definitely a blessing.
Yeah, that was a really good answer. Or both of those, I feel like speak to the home is where the heart is kind of thing. You really have to take that on in the military because you get used to becoming best friends with the people that you're with, and then before you know it, 6 months later, they're flying across the world to be stationed somewhere else. But with that, I've got really great friends all around the world, all around the country, and this question, I guess, for me is a little bit less military focused, but I'm adopted, so I come from adopted from India, but my father was a Wisconsin veteran. So I grew up in Madison, but then when people ask me when I joined, they're like, where are you from? You have a Wisconsin accent and your last name is Brown? Like, they don't know what to do with me. But it's great to to have that experience of getting to travel around the world and meet these people and then have them ask, and I get to say Wisconsin. Like, I have, on my kit, there was a Wisconsin flag, so people would take pictures of me and be like, oh, I guess that's what the Wisconsin flag looks like. So I don't know. I really am proud to say I am from Wisconsin. I didn't get to have the same sort of like traveling experiences these two had, but I do think that I got to have that later, right, joining the military and then realizing that home is just wherever you end up being because it's with the people that you become friends and family with.
As a fun little follow-up, if anyone wants to answer, approximately how many mailing addresses have you had?
5.
16.
Oh yeah, not that many. I would say 6 or 7 probably.
Yeah. So to speak more about, what maybe makes this community unique, how would you describe the sense of community that you find with other military-connected individuals?
It's like a breath of like fresh air almost, the relatability I can feel with other military connected individuals. I've actually noticed it more this year as a house fellow. I have 2 of my residents are actually military connected, and you can see like their face, like I was like relaxed when I tell them, oh, I understand exactly what you're talking about because my parents also served, or I know exactly what it feels like to move around. So that sense of community, it's like you immediately become connected over just this one bond, which is really special. But I didn't really get to experience that much until this year. Again, there's not that many of us on campus, and then also my history moving around in Wisconsin, I didn't really feel that sense of like community with among military connected kids because sometimes I was the only one in class, and it wasn't really that much of a conversation I had in the school like system. So now it's really interesting to be able to feel that sense of community.
I agree. Like, it's a foundational thing that you're able to just completely bond over this, because when you're talking to like regular like civilians and you go like, yeah, my dad's on a deployment, when I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade, you'd say that and they'd be like, oh, my dad's been on a work trip before. And you're like, oh, like that's not the same, but like you don't want to discount how they're feeling as well with that, but you don't know how to explain. So you kind of just shut down. You're like, okay, yep, moving on. So being able to have someone that is able to understand that immediately or has those experiences as well, your immediate like family, like, oh my goodness, like tell me like everything about where you've lived, tell me about like the deployments, tell me about like everything that like you've never been able to tell someone else, because like I want to understand you and you want to understand me, and it's gets like this weight off your shoulders of being able to tell others about that.
I think for anybody that's traveled before, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I was living in San Diego and I was at a party. I was older than 21, and I looked across the room and there was a guy drinking spotted cow. And I walked over to him and I was like, "Are you from Wisconsin?" He's like, "Yeah, man, I'm from Wisconsin." And we were like two people in California drinking Wisconsin beer. So I would say that it's a very similar experience when you're military connected. You run into someone and you're like, "Oh wait," whether it's my parent was in the military, or I'm a veteran, or somebody like, "Oh, my grandpa was in the military." I feel like I get that a lot too. Like, "Oh, my grandpa was served in the Korean War," something like that. There is a sense of shared identity there because it's like, okay, I know what you kind of been through by hearing the stories, or maybe worrying about somebody, right? Like if your person is on deployment, whether it's a spouse or a family member, you're like, I don't know what they're doing, right? When I was on the ship. I was on an aircraft carrier for 5 or 6 months, and I would be able to call back, but I couldn't tell any of my family members or my partner at the time like where I was or what we were doing. So they were kind of like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Oh, I just had lunch." Like, it's nothing crazy. But so the sense of community really just comes from shared experience, and I think part of the reason you'll see veterans really, or I'm sorry, military connected people moving together is because there is that sense of what do they call it? The bonding through misery, bonding through something like that, right? Like you go through a lot of really hard experiences, right? Basic training is not a really fun time. I don't look back and think, man, I would do that again. But I do think that I got some really great friends out of that, and then all the other experiences past that just build this sense of understanding that comes through going through that. So, yeah, thanks.
I think it's sometimes easy for us to forget how transient folks are in the military. So when we're explaining this, AJ mentioned every 6 months later, your best friend might be moving. Always. So you make these very fast friendships, either people you're serving with or for folks who are in a community of other service members and their families. You get 3-year orders at max to a particular location, and then you're gone. So friendships are fast, but they're deep. One of my best friends, Mike, I haven't seen him since 2003. He's still my best friend. Yeah, it's. I think it's something that we gloss over, and I appreciate you sharing that. So, how have you used what you've learned through your military connected experiences now as a student?
So yes, as a student now, I think really I attribute my military experience as the reason why I want to study international studies. That global connection I was able to have at a really young age has prompted me to want to learn about the world around me and look at things in a very much global context. I think it also, in the military, you are often moved to places you don't want to go to. I remember when my parents told me Wisconsin from Texas, I was like, I don't want to go to Wisconsin, but I ended up learning so much about my small town in Wisconsin. I feel that's so valuable. Even if I don't agree with what it's like there or how people think, I got to learn. I got that hands-on experience. So I think the military taught me to look at everything as an opportunity and to really be present in where you are and to learn from things. And so I feel like I'm really grateful that the military was able to give me that experience and to use that as a student now.
I agree with that, as well as currently serving as well, like just the organizational stuff. Like oftentimes I'm the type of person who, if I find out an assignment's due in 2 weeks, I'm getting it done as soon as possible, versus the rest of my friends are procrastinating forever, and then they're freaking out and I'm chilling. I'm fine. Like, I don't know why you guys did that to yourself. So it's definitely like always staying on top of things and being ready for the next thing, as well as working with kids. Obviously it's nice to have that big present voice at times. So that's another perk of being in the military and being able to just show kids like what I've learned as well through my experience as a military brat, as well as currently serving.
I still procrastinate. No, I would say that, so my time in the military started, like I said, of me dropping out of college the first time, and I remember sitting in lecture hall thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go enlist. And I thought I was going to do less studying and less homework in the military, and I ended up studying more in the military than I ever had before in school. It turns out that there's a bunch of schools that you go to, and the standards are higher, actually. Like there was a point where I was like, you need to get an 85 on every single one of these tests or you're going to be kicked out of this job. So it was more stressful, I would say, than my previous experiences. But there was a time that, for anybody curious, there's a way that if you put an explosive in the ground, you don't have to cover it with stuff. And you can put it in a way that is really safe for everybody if they stand a certain distance away. And the only way to find that out is SOCOTOA. And I don't know if anybody else paid attention in math class in sophomore year high school. I didn't. And I looked at my friend and I was like, I don't remember SOCOTOA. But it was one of those things where, he did. He was super smart. And I got to have an experience of realizing that the stuff we're learning in school can be applicable, even if I don't really realize it at the time. So then after having that experience, I was like, I'm ready to go back to school and actually have some background and some context, I think, which is what I was looking for when I first went to school. So people are like, should I go to college? I'm like, well, what do you want to do with it? What are you passionate about? And for a kid like me that did not study very hard at first, I really just wanted that context, and the military gave me that.
These are all wonderful examples, and I really appreciate everyone sharing a lot more about your experiences and maybe successes and things that you think really fondly about. But it would also be nice to know about maybe how you've overcome challenges as a military-connected student.
Yeah, overcoming challenges, I really began to recognize how the military really strengthens the family dynamic. Well, in my case, every case is different. I think that's something to highlight. Every individual is going to have a different relationship when it comes to how the military shaped their family. But in my case, it really created like stronger ties for all of us, and I felt like they were the ones who I can really lean on to when I come with challenges because they know contextually what I've been through, how I've grown up. So when overcoming challenges, I look to my parents because they've been through situations where they had to make difficult decisions or sacrifices. So learning from them has been really helpful for me and especially as growing as an adult now.
I also just like reflect on the relationships that I've made with my parents as well as individuals through basic or tech school. Oftentimes you hear stereotypes of how the military treat females, and there was an instance of that in basic training where there are guys in the flight next to me who were making comments about the girls, and the boys in my flight said, no, we're not going to stand for that, and wrote 3-page papers and turned it into the officers that watched over us and got those boys kicked out for the comments that they were making and the things that they were doing. It was an instance of, like, we're not going to stand for this, and that's very much how the military is now. Like, as soon as there's a zero-tolerance policy, and they very much stand on that. So just knowing that you have those people that are willing to back you up, even if you don't ask for it. We didn't ask for that, and they were ready to go for arms for us at any moment, just at the drop of the dime. They were there and ready, and if you do ask, then they're even more ready too.
I feel like this question could be taken a couple of different ways. So I find myself a little bit like having a hard time coming up with an answer. But I would say as a military-connected individual, the first thing that comes up for me is we've all been through stuff. We've all been through things that I, at the time, was not super happy about, but I look back and think I'm really grateful for that experience because it was the hardest thing I had ever done at the time, and then I got over it or got through it because of other people oftentimes, right? Working with my teammates or my friends, even if we weren't best friends, I could really count on these people to work together to get through something, and then it would shatter my idea of what I thought was attainable. I would start the day. There were times that I was like, I don't even really know if I'm going to come back alive after the end of X, Y, or Z. And then at the end, I would be sitting with my friends and be like, man, that was crazy. Let's do it again tomorrow, right? So it really put into perspective the challenges, not necessarily anything specifically of like, oh, I still struggle with studying. I still struggle with time management at times. I still get lonely, right, like missing friends and stuff. But the biggest thing is knowing that I don't have to do it alone anymore. At one point, I used to think like, oh yeah, I don't need anybody. I'm strong and independent. But it turns out that I was much stronger when I was a part of a bigger community or bigger group of people. So that's helped me a lot moving forward.
Yeah, I actually just wrote "Never Alone," and that's true in the military. You don't do anything by yourself. Everything's a team. Everything's a team. And I think that's probably a little bit why this question can be difficult, because we say individual, but you all gave answers about how your people helped you get through something, or you got through it with other folks. And that's also something that I see on campus. Individuality is important here. You pick your own classes. You go by yourself everywhere, right? And that's such a stark contrast to life in the military. So family, team, people, that's important.
No, I want to know, I couldn't even go to the bathroom by myself in basic or tech schools. So everywhere you have someone with you.
Okay, so how do you think your identities show up in the way you engage in communities?
This question, I really am thinking of it in the fact that there's many parts of my identities that intersect. Specifically, I am Latina, so growing up, this dual identity of being not only a military kid, but also being Latina and a child of an immigrant have been something that I've really been especially more conscious about as I grow into adulthood and education specifically. Since applying for university, since being a student, I have become more aware of the privileges that I have because of the GI Bill. The fact that I'm able to go to university and comfortably say that I do not have to worry about anything financial that is such a privilege to be able to only have to worry about an exam, only have to worry about the all-nighter I have to pull through to finish an essay, and never have to think of how am I going to pay for next semester. So my military identity has really pushed me to be critical of my position in academia and in my community, and also has pushed me to think how can I advocate for other Latinos and also advocate for education as a right.
Yeah, so as noted in my bio, I'm a Christian. So I grew up in a Christian family as well. And during those deployments where my dad wasn't there, my mom also had two different forms of cancer. So both my parents were kind of just out, and I had a little brother. And at that time, my church was always like, I came home from school and there was always a hot meal waiting on the doorstep for me. There's always ways that they were helping to provide for us. And that definitely strengthened my faith, as well as coming here. I've met so many different individuals who identify with the Christian community as well, who are military, and being able to bring those together, it just helps them understand their purpose more if they are following of the faith, as well as just helping, like, when you do go into those times of, like, I don't know if I'm going to come out of this alive, or I don't know how I'm going to be able to face this, just knowing that I have that to rely on as well was definitely an area where my military and faith just was able to intersect.
I had a mentor of mine a couple of days ago email me the definition of a word, and at the time I was like, why are you sending me this? But the word was sonder. And if I don't mess this up, it has to do with the idea that every single person that we interact with has an very complex, intricate sense of identities that we will never fully be able to understand, right? The dreams, the hopes, the fears, the letdowns, disappointments. And when I think of like the different identities that we get to have, we are all of those things, right? Me being military connected and a veteran is just a part of myself, right? I am a son, I'm a brother, I'm a part of an interracial family. I'm a military kid and a veteran, technically a disabled veteran, right? So whenever I get to show up in community, the question is not like, what identity do I need to bring? It's what identity can I bring? So when I'm in a classroom, is it, okay, have these 18 to 22-year-olds never interacted with somebody in the military? Okay, cool, let me share my military experience. Or did this person think that a military person is only from this demographic, from this part of the United States, or this political leaning, whatever, and then I get to just shake things up a little bit and be like, no, man, my best friend going through EOD school was a dude from Georgia, Southern Baptist, who had never had Indian food. And we were thick as thieves, right? So it was one of those things of like, it really, the identity that we get to have really depends on the intricacy that we bring to the table and the willingness we are to share that with other people.
Thank you so much for sharing all of those really wonderful intersectionalities, multiplicities, and the ways that you get to show up. What do you wish more people knew about having a military-connected identity?
I wish people knew that everyone has different experiences, and you obviously saw this today in the panel, but everyone has different feelings regarding the military. Everyone has different how connected they feel to it. It's different across the board, and I think times like these is really important to kind of give military connected individuals a platform to speak on how they feel regarding the military. I think there's so much insight. I'm learning every day, and I'm learning right now with my peers more about their experience, so there's something truly valuable about it. It's not a monolith at all.
I agree with that. Like, there's so many different people who come in and are serving for different reasons. I think of my bunkmates. We all went by nicknames. There was Mississippi, who is from the Deep South, and she was there just to get her education. She wanted to be a dietitian in the future. There was Jersey Shore. She was Intel. She was the smartest person you'd ever meet. And then there was Reyes, which we called Sunshine. She was the happiest person you could meet. She would always get in trouble for smiling or giggling. And so there were so many different identities that were represented in that time throughout, like, everyone that you interacted with. There were so many different stories, so many different reasons why people were there. And a lot of times people try to put military people into a box, but we exist outside of that box. Like, we are so many different things, and we're serving for so many different purposes. And that's where a lot of us find joys in being able to serve for our education, but also knowing that we're serving to protect the rights of different people and to protect the ones that we love.
Yeah, I really like both of those answers. I think for me, I want to lean into the melting pot of the military, right? When people say the United States is the melting pot of the world, I would say the military is the melting pot of the United States. Truly, you get to interact with and be surrounded by people who are different and in all of the best ways possible. To have hard conversations about all of the things that are divisive and realize that I also can trust this person to save my life in a hard situation is one of the most healing experiences I've had as a citizen of the United States. I think also that like to that point, the people that I got to be surrounded by were some of the most bright and inspirational people I've ever met, right? Like one of my OICs going through school was a Naval Academy graduate Rhodes Scholar who now is on SEAL Team 6 as an EOD tech. Another person was a professional poker player worth millions of dollars who runs a blackjack team in his free time. I think he's out of the military now. And then there were kids like me who dropped out of college and just wanted to go see the world, right? So it's really a broad span of people, and there also isn't necessarily the hierarchy of like one person or one experience is better than the others. It just has to do with like how many different people do I get to meet? And you know, you run into the people from Wisconsin every once in a while, and you get to have that spotted cow experience, or you get to be like, man, I've never met somebody that speaks so many different languages or is from the East Coast or the West Coast. And that's part of the best parts of the military, I think.
So, if anybody has questions, first off, anybody has questions about data, statistics, wants to follow up on the first part, contact us. We'd love to talk to you. Our website is veterans.wisc.edu. Our email address is veterans@wisc.edu. I'd love to follow up and have that sort of conversation, but I want to guard the last couple of minutes for questions for our panelists. If anybody wants to ask a question of our panelists that we didn't get to, we'd like to take that. Oh, and we do have some. We love that you're doing all military connected, not just active serving, but also the dependents' children of those who served. I mean, yes, thank you for that one. Does your enrollment data for veterans include graduate students? Absolutely. And Ethan, we can talk to you about that. I don't want to bog too much down with graduate students. Graduate students from a veteran's perspective make up a pretty high percentage, higher than their non-veteran peers when we're looking at enrollment data. But yeah, we've got a lot of facts. Any questions for our panelists? I'll walk it up to you if you. Oh, you're pointing at the screen? Oh, okay. How are some ways they'd appreciate we engage in their military-connected identity with their other salient identities? Does anybody want to take how you'd like to be engaged with being a military-connected student and your other things?
That's a good question. I think that the biggest thing that I would say to anybody that's military connected would be don't shy away from that. In any of the spaces you show up, whether it's Bible study or the Latinx community, it's representative, or we get to be representatives of the military and military connected people, and that whole group of people, which again is really diverse, but also for some people they've never interacted with a veteran or they've never interacted with somebody that has served. So there is a sense of it doesn't have to be divisive at all. It doesn't have to be like, just because I have this identity, I can't cross or bring my military identity into that. I would just say, yeah, lean into it and recognize that there's no reason not to mix the two.
Going off of that, I think that's really important because I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes across like what is being military connected, what does that look like, and so being those figures that can actually break down some misconceptions or just bring more information, I think is really, really useful and really important.
Thanks. I can't get to our next question, which is about departments and how they focus on community building, but we'd like to talk offline about that. And then AJ, also a Madison College alum, gets a proud shout out as well. So I first want to, I recognize we're about 26 seconds over. So I want to first thank our panelists. It takes a lot of courage to come up here. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of yourselves with us today. So thank you. All right, and then Amanda's just got the last close.
I just want to say again how much we appreciate our panelists, but also you can see the empathy and the kindness and the connections that folks are really willing to share. I'm so thankful for these 3 students, but we also have tons of other students that are on this campus too. So you might not know at first when you run into a military connected student, but also as they encourage, don't be afraid to shy away from asking questions and building those fast friendships. And the theme of this conference is threads of belonging. And really a lot of what our students shared are a lot of those belonging pieces that fit within the community. So thank you for showing up today, for being willing to engage in these conversations and listen, and have a wonderful rest of the conference.